Who's Better Than You? That's the book written by Will Packer, who has been producing some of my favorite movies since he was practically a teenager. He produced Straight Outta Compton. He produced Girls Trip with former podcast guest Tiffany Haddish starring in it. And he's produced a ton of other movies against impossible odds. How did he build the confidence? What were some of his crazy stories? Here's Will Packer to describe the whole thing.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
No. Are you in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Nice. Normally I am.
What are you working on?
Other than the book, I got a couple of features that we're working on that we're very close to getting our final green light on for this summer. I'm working on a new television show that will shoot hopefully in the fall. So a movie for Universal, television show for Amazon. I just launched a new unscripted show. I'm on my 10th season of a dating show. It's actually the longest running Black dating show on television called Ready to Love. It's on Oprah's network on OWN. 10th season.
How do you make like a reality dating show stand out?
It's hard. I mean, the answer is the people, but also the formatting matters, the approach that you take to it. At the end of the day, shows around love and people who are desirous of love and finding love, they do very well if you've got interesting people that are willing to be like open and genuine and honest and all the things. So I think we got that with this show.
Let's say someone wants to pitch you like a movie or a TV show. What is the spark that says, I got to do this?
You know what? Okay, so when I'm thinking about whether or not I'm going to take on a project, one of the things I do is I always identify the who and the why. Who is who it's for, and I'm very specific about that, James. I'm very like, hey, tell me exactly the person that is going to circle the date on the calendar when they hear about this project, that is going to say, okay, you know what? I'm stopping the other stuff I'm streaming. I'm going to get the babysitter. I'm going to the theater, or whatever medium this is going to be presented in. This is for me, right? In today's environment, because there's so much content, it's totally oversaturated. You got to have an audience that literally owns the content. So that's number one. And I'm very specific about that. I say, okay, name them. Like, what do they look like? How many kids they got? Where do they work? Like, what's their name? Like, give me this fictional demographic for the person that is going to come out for this show. And if I can't immediately imagine Sharonda with 2.5 kids who works at the CVS pharmacy and, does yoga on the weekend and cycles on Sundays, but only every other Sunday because in between she goes to church. If I can't think of that exact person, I go, Sharonda's going to love this movie. It is for her. She's all about it. Then I don't have a who. I don't have a specific demographic. And by the way, I then think about the development of the project very specifically around that audience that I'm making it for. Right? Who's the cast that they want to see? What are the plot points that are going to move them? What are the other elements that are going to be important to them? The why is the why now. There's so many great ideas out there, so many great true stories, but why? Right? Why? Why does this story absolutely have to be told now? And if you don't hit that bar, you don't hit that very specific, this is who the audience is, and this is the why now, then as a producer, it's too hard to get these things made. It's too hard to get every single project. I don't care if it's big, if it's small, television, film, doesn't matter. It's so hard to get these things over the hill that if you don't have that why and that who, it's not for me. It's not something that I can take on. It's very hard.
I love this concept of naming your audience. Like you talk about Sharonda in the book, you talk about Corey for, I forget which movie it was, maybe Ride
Along. It was Cody. It was Cody. He's my white guy in Miami. Cody.
Yeah.
Young teenager who hangs out at the mall. I remember. That's right. Yep.
And that works for almost anything, like a book or a business or anything.
Oh, anything where you're expending resources, where you are consumer facing, where you need people to come in and support it. You need to very specifically identify your audience. And I do. I literally make up a fictional person because then it personifies who I'm going after. It's not just, oh, I'm going after, young African-American teens in Indiana. You know what I mean? No, I want to be very specific about who that person is, and then I craft a whole narrative around them. I think you got to do that. I don't care if you're opening a coffee shop or a gas station or an online clothing retail store. Identify that person because then you're thinking about every decision you're making with that person in mind, that fictional person that you have created, but you give them life, you personify it. Now you've got an audience and a demographic that you can almost like debate with. You bandy back and forth your ideas and you go, nope, you know what? Cody's not going to like that. That's not the way to go.
But how does it work? Like, let's say I'm pitching you an idea or a script I wrote, and do you already have in mind, like, the next movie you want to do, what your audience is, what your audience's person is, or are you thinking of it as you're looking at pitches?
No, as you bring in a pitch to me, I'm thinking as you're talking, the who and the why. Who is this for? You would be very surprised at how often when somebody is pitching a project in Hollywood, the who is themselves. The who is the writer or the producer or director who says, I think this is cool. I want to see this. That's never a good enough reason. Sometimes if you're making art for art's sake, but if you're making it with the economic imperative of you're trying to get a financier to fund it, and that's largely the business that I'm in, is making commercial projects. I have to make them for X and then they have to make Y, and Y needs to be bigger than X. If you're in that business of content creation, then it's not enough that the creator, the writer, the person behind the idea, the ideator thinks it's cool. That's not enough. So you're pitching me, James, I'm going, all right, who? Who is in it? Who is the person that is going to, and who is the group of people that is represented by this person? Should clarify that, because that one person personifies a group of people, right? That we're making this thing for. We got to identify that who. And you got to, typically, that who will tell you what you should spend on the project. Because generally, that demographic, if you say, okay, that demographic is coming out strong, then that's your core audience. So for your core audience, because very few things these days are for everybody, right? 4 quadrant, as we used to call them. Hitting every single demo. Young, old, male, female, all the ethnicities covered. Very few projects appeal to everybody because now everybody has an option for what they want. Whatever you're into, somebody's making it for you out there. So you got to make sure that the economics line up with whatever that core audience is. And the creator, the ideator, that ain't enough. And then the why, that's the urgency, right? Why is the story got to be told now? Because if it's something that people can wait on, they're going to wait. And if they can wait, if you got something that's good out there, but it's like, I don't have to see it right now, they can wait, then typically not only are they going to wait, but they're never going to see it because there's too much stuff out there right now.
Okay, so 2 questions. Let's say you have a movie that is the best, like Girls Trip, that did over $100 million, right? I don't know what the final box office was. And let's say Sharonda was your imaginary audience to watch Girls Trip. Why don't you now do every movie for Sharonda, make every movie for a Sharonda?
Well, I've made multiple movies for Sharonda for sure, but Sharonda's complex, right? Every movie that has, let's say, Tiffany Haddish, who you had on your show, who's an amazing, incredible actress with an incredible brand, every movie she's in will not necessarily work for Sharonda because Sharonda's got tons of options out there. So you got to really make each one bespoke for that audience. And so the answer of, well, why don't you just make every movie for Sharonda? James, that's what Hollywood tries to do. That's literally the model of Hollywood, is a reactive industry. You find something that works and then you repeat it 1 trillion times. And then audiences go, you're just giving us the same shit over and over again. That's why that
Right.
doesn't work. And so you have to make sure each time that you're making something, even if it's for the same demographic, you got to approach it in a different way. It's got to be new and fresh because they've already gotten Girls Trip, let's say, right? They got Girls Trip. So you can't just come out with another Girls Trip under a different name. It's got to be something about it different because they've already seen Girls Trip. So what's the next thing? What's the evolution of that that's going to appeal to that audience?
And let's just say Girls Trip as an example. Why Girls Trip then in like 2012, whenever it was, or no, sorry, 2016, 2017? Why Girls Trip then? Like, what was special about it for that time?
I think there's a couple of things. One, and probably the biggest thing is something that's a secret of my success is that a lot of people think that I'm always trying to make things for underserved demographics. And that's not incorrect, but that's missing the point. What I'm really trying to do is make under-delivered experiences, right? So I am trying to create content that shows authentic, inclusive, because my projects, even with the Girls Trip that stars 4 African-American females, it wasn't just for African-American females. My second biggest demo was Caucasian women for that movie. And it's because it was inclusive, because it had universal storylines that no matter what you look like, whether you saw yourself in the actors on the screen or not, you could relate to some aspect of that film because it was intended to be universal subject matter. But that experience was an under-delivered experience in a theatrical marketplace. That's what I was going after. That movie took an actual event. There was this actual music festival that happens every year in New Orleans. And it's called the Essence Music Festival because it was sponsored and started by Essence Magazine. And the genesis of Girls Trip is because I went to that festival. I had been multiple times before as a married man. I got a divorce from my first wife, went as a newly single guy, and met my current wife at that festival. Because that festival is first of all, it's a good time, a lot of music, a lot of fun, revelry, the whole thing, all the good things a festival has. But it also happens to have a lot of single African-American women at this festival. So insert newly single Will Packer, I was like, I'm going to Essence. Let's go, right? And I did, and I met my wife there. So the fact that it was an authentic event that actually happened, that had never been portrayed in this way, that made it an under-delivered experience. Also, this idea of having women who were behaving badly, and I'll put that in quotes because they were just behaving like people, but they weren't there doing the things that you typically see, had up until around that same time, Bridesmaids was the project that had gotten a lot of attention because you had these bridesmaids that were behaving the same way that groomsmen act, right, around the wedding. And they were doing all those kinds of crazy, wild things. You didn't see women do that a lot. Well, you especially hadn't seen African-American women do that because there was this perception that Black women didn't want to see themselves that way. And I had this feeling that Black women wanted to see themselves authentically, whatever that meant, the good, the bad, the ugly, warts and all. They wanted to just see real people. And so that's what we showcased there. That was undelivered. That actual festival was undelivered. And then because we had a great team between the writers and the director, my buddy Malcolm Lee, who directed that, and Kenya Barris and Tracy Oliver, who wrote the project, together, all those elements came together to present this authentic experience that then played beyond that core audience of my Sharondas.
And so that was a huge success. Was that your biggest success up to that point?
No, I don't. I think Ride Along actually made more. It's a
Ice
big
Cube,
success.
Kevin Hart.
Definitely. Ice Cube, Kevin Hart. I executive produced Straight Outta Compton. I think Straight Outta Compton was before. I had to look at the timeline now. It's all kind of running together. But it's definitely top 5 for sure. One of my top 5 most successful projects.
take a quick break. If you like this episode, I'd really, really appreciate it. It would mean so much to me. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the podcast. Email me at altucher@gmail.com and tell me why you subscribed. Thanks. Now, Straight Outta Compton, you don't really mention it in the book. That's one of my all-time favorite movies ever. Like, how did that one? What's your involvement in that? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I was an executive producer on that project. So when you're a producer, you're hands-on from like the ground up. Typically, if you're doing your job the way it's supposed to be done, Girls Trip, for instance, that was my idea because I had that experience where I met my wife at that festival. With Straight Outta Compton, that team largely was in place. You had an incredible director in F. Gary Gray who grew up during that time period in that world. He was the perfect person to make it. Clearly, you had Ice Cube and Dr. Dre who were still living, and then you had Eazy-E's estate. And I had a relationship with the studio who ultimately financed that project. And so I was helpful in being a conduit. Film it takes a village, and it is a collaborative medium, and everybody has a role to play. But my role in that one was much more supervisory and in helping to pull the elements together as opposed to being in an execution role. And so, interestingly enough, when we were shooting Ride Along 2, it was at the same time that Straight Outta Compton was being filmed. And we were shooting Ride Along 2 between Miami and Atlanta, and Straight Outta Compton was being shot in Los Angeles. And so we would be on set, and I was on set primarily in Atlanta and Miami on Ride Along 2 with Ice Cube. And I remember we would be on set, and Ice Cube, we would have these iPads, and they would be showing us the live footage of what was being shot in LA. And in between takes, Ice Cube, while he's got to know his lines and act against crazy Kevin Hart and be the consummate straight man, which he is, he would then watch as the definitive story of his life and his group was being filmed in LA. By the way,
played by his son.
By the way, it was his son's debut. His big screen debut for his son. By the way, his son was playing him. And I would go to Cube and I would be like, this is such a mind fuck. Like, how are you keeping all this straight? And then it would be like, okay, we're ready for you on set, Cube. And then he's got to go and jump into the character and Ride Along 2. And I learned a lot about compartmentalization from Ice Cube because he would say, hey, I can only control what I can control. I got to keep my eye on whatever the main thing is in front of me at that time. And so that's what he was doing. And he would watch it and he would give some notes to his son or give some notes to F. Gary Gray or whoever was shooting in LA. And then he'd come back, he'd be in the character in Atlanta, and then he would do that scene. And so I was like, it's amazing. And I'm a good compartmentalizer. But the way he was able to do that with everything, it would have made my head explode. Most people, I think. But he did an excellent job. And I realized he was just staying focused on whatever was right in front of him at that time. And that's what we got to do, man. We get, especially right now, right? Shit is so loud. It's a loud world in which we live. There is always something vying for your attention. Somebody's watching this right now and their phone is dinging with notifications and something's happening on another screen somewhere, another device, and, music is playing and stuff is going on, right? Rainbows and unicorns flying around the room. At the end of the day, that stuff is just sucking the energy out of you. It's just draining you. It's just pulling your attention away. And that is pulling your attention away from the main thing. And so that main thing, whatever that is suffering because of all these other things that are vying for your attention. If we can stay focused, and this is something that you have to practice. It's a muscle that you can get stronger with. But if you can stay focused and keep the main thing, you will get further in your progression of whatever the goal is that you're trying to hit and trying to make. Lessen the distractions. A lot of it's optional. A lot of it is things that we can control. We can control the level of how many notifications you're getting on your phone, right? What's in the background while you're trying to focus on a particular thing. We can control these things, but oftentimes we choose not to. You feel like you're going to miss out. No, what you're going to miss out on is being able to progress on your main goal faster. So keep the main thing the main thing. There'll be time for the other stuff. We all try to do too much in the way of multitasking, and what happens, because we're not amazing compartmentalizers like an ice cube, and we're draining the focus from what it should really be on.
You know, you're giving Ice Cube a lot of credit, but I would say the job of a movie producer or a TV producer or whatever is to multitask. Like, you have to bring together the cast, the writing, stay under budget, figure out all the sets, locations, make sure the schedule's made, make sure the marketing happens. You know, you describe a little bit of it when you're chasing down Kevin Hart for when he's, you know, in one of your first big movies and he's off going to New York to film his special. Yeah. Like, you have to, your job is to multitask, so nobody else has to multitask as much during a movie. How do you keep yourself focused in these critical times?
Yeah, that is very true. That is, you know, when people ask what the job of a producer is, you know, I say it's like being the biggest project manager you can imagine, right? I always use the analogy of the Oscars. You see all these awards that are given to best actor, best sound, best wardrobe, best writer. And at the end of the night, the last award goes to best picture, and the producer gets the best picture award. And I use that because the producer was responsible for pulling together all those other categories. So that's an apropos analogy for what a producer does. And you're absolutely correct. And the answer to the question is, you keep the main thing, right? Because as a producer, I always say, I never get a call and somebody is saying, we just want to let you know everything's going great, right? You just don't get that call as a producer. You never get the, hey, I just want to let you know over here on this set, everybody is good. The actors are happy. We're on time. We're on schedule. We're on budget. Just letting you know. Nobody ever does that because they don't have time, because they're putting out fires. Because when things are going good, you focus on the good stuff and you only call the producer to come in when stuff is going wrong. So what happens is you end up getting a lot of calls of fires burning. As a producer, your job is always to put out the biggest fire. Whatever the fire, whatever it is that needs your attention the most, that's the main thing. You get that under control. You may not even be able to put it out. And this is life. This is how a lot of people have to figure out how to juggle their lives, right? Kids, marriage, job, entrepreneurial endeavor, new challenge we're trying to pivot to. What is the thing that needs your attention the most at that time? Then that's the main thing. And you keep the main thing the main thing. That's my job as a producer. That's my approach. I have an electrical engineering degree. So one of the things I think that gives me a leg up on some of my creative peers in the business is that I approach everything analytically. In engineering, you're taught to problem solve analytically. Whatever the problem is, you break it down. Now, typically, you're talking about technical problems in engineering. And so you break down the elements of the problem and you do the math or the science or the theory that approaches each piece of that problem, that attacks each individual piece of the problem, right? Think about people who learn math, you know, in like middle school math, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? You do the parentheses first, and then the exponential, and then multiplication, and division. Well, I approach creative problems the same way. I am analytical in my approach to what is a very creative field. So when I've got an issue on a set, I've got a project I'm trying to get greenlit, I'm trying to get the financing for, I'm trying to get distribution, I gotta, you know, the marketing's not quite working, we gotta pivot. I do the same thing. That's when my analytical brain kicks in from that engineering degree. So I still use it. So tell my mom I didn't waste all the money that I spent. I didn't waste that scholarship. But a lot of my peers approach problems in this industry creatively and with emotion. And I approach them analytically. Break it down. What are the elements that we need to fix? and then individually attack those elements one by one. That's a very analytical approach to a creative industry, but it has served me very well.
You know, to get into that industry, I feel to get into any creative industry, there has to be some level of arrogance and confidence. And, you know, this speaks to the title of your book, you know, Who's Better Than You? And when you're first starting out, you have to have this belief that someone is going to care about what you have to say, and someone's going to care about something you make. And you have to, it's almost like you have to make that leap where you sort of hold your eyes, or, you know, keep your eyes shut and just be as confident as possible. And then at the end of that leap, you've earned that confidence, but not before you make that leap. Like, what do you think when you first started kind of putting movies together? What gave you the confidence that you could do this?
It's not like I definitely believe that confidence is a skill that, like most skills, you can grow. And I am a big believer in the idea of healthy arrogance. You can grow that. You don't have to be born thinking, you know what, I got this, I can do this, I can do things. No, most people are not. Now, for me, it was two things. One was I had amazing parents, and I tell my friends who have young kids all the time, treat those kids just like Simba in The Lion King, right? Take them to the highest mountain, lift them up, and say, everything the sun touches is yours, my son, right? My parents absolutely told me, listen, if you're willing to work hard and bust your ass, you can do anything. They told me that, and I had the audacity to believe it. And so there was like this pathway in my mind of, okay, I can be successful. I need to put in the work. There's a path that I have to take, but I can do it. I can be successful because they instilled that in me very early. The other thing, which specifically applies to the career that I chose, is this idea that the power of naivete. If I knew then what I knew now, what I know now, if I knew then what I know now, I would not be a movie producer because it's too damn hard. Because the aperture for success is way too narrow. And my analytical brain would have said, you know what, there's so many other things that you can do that would more likely lead to success. Let's choose one of those others. That's smarter. I literally came in and said, you know what? In college, I'm going to make a movie. I'm going to make it as best I can. Then I'm going to send it to Hollywood and bam, I'm going to be a movie maker. Like, that's how it works. That is not how it works at all. But I didn't know that at the time. So I did go out and I made the absolute best movie I could. And I thought that was going to work. And then when it didn't work, it forced me to pivot to go and independently distribute that film. And then I had to independently distribute my next film because Hollywood didn't care about that one either. The power of naivete made me go in and go full steam ahead into the unknown. When you embrace the unknown, sometimes the known, it is what I call preparation paralysis. We want to know everything before we jump in to the breach, before we try something. It's like, I got to know everything to make sure it's safe, right? And sometimes you just got to start climbing the damn mountain. Sometimes you just got to go out and embrace the unknown and know you're not going to know, because you can prepare all you want. You can prepare to climb that damn mountain. You can go out and get the right shoes and the right rope and the right canteen, and you got your, your hat and your hoodie, you're ready. Until you get on that mountain and the rocks start slipping under your hand and you got to pivot and you got to go another direction, until you feel that cold air stinging on your face, till you're actually out there climbing the mountain, you don't know what it's going to take. Embrace that unknown and go for it. What were you going to say?
But you had to basically find a script, and your buddy Rob was the director. But you had to raise some money. You had to find actors. You had to shoot the movie, edit the movie, and bring it together. And like one person later said to you, when you handed him a VHS tape of your movie, you actually had a product, which was an amazing thing.
Yeah. I mean, but remember, I didn't know that I was producing at the time, right? I was literally just going out and I was trying to create something as best I could and help a friend who had a clear passion for filmmaking. And I give Rob Hardy all the credit because he knew he wanted to be a director. I didn't know what a producer was. I was literally helping to facilitate this production that he was doing. So I was going out, doing whatever I could, which ultimately meant raising money, casting actors, and then independently distributing it when we couldn't get traditional distribution. Later, I realized, oh, that's what a producer does. And so I forewent going to a business school because I said, this is all they're going to teach me is how to sell a widget. And I just made a widget and sold it. Like, this is the thing. What's this thing called, guys? It's called producing. Hey, I'm going to be a producer. That's what it was. But for me, it was about just giving 110% into something that I didn't even know what it was. And I learned along the way the power of niche marketing and the power of storytelling. And I fell in love with storytelling. People too often, I think, are waiting for their passion to smack them in the face. They're waiting to get to a point where they know exactly what it is they want to do. And they subscribe to that mantra of find the thing you love, you'll never work another day in your life. And I don't believe in that. I think that's an after-school special. I think it's stupid. And you should not listen to that. I think you got to find something that you're good at, right? Whether you love it or not, you got to find something that you can do well. Work hard at it if you do well, especially if you can get compensated for it, and then see if you can find the love or the passion within it. If you hate it, then don't do it. But you can't sit around and wait to find something that is going to give you butterflies every morning. That may not happen. It doesn't for most people. I found my passion within something that it turns out I didn't even know existed, but I was good at it. I was able to use the set of skills that I had in that particular arena. And then I found love within it. That's a much more likely result for most people.
And so let me ask you, like, just in this current environment, there's all these streaming services. Like when I was a kid, there were 3 channels and like 4 movie studios, and that's it.
Yep.
Now there's like
Same.
1,000 new TV shows a day or a year, 1,000 new movies a year. How come it's still hard? Like actors still can't find jobs. Writers still can't find jobs. Like, was there that many people who wanted to be in Hollywood, but we just never heard from them? And now there's thousands of new shows. It's still not enough?
Yeah. I mean, look, more actors are working now, but more people want to be in the business and see it as a viable option, a viable career. Because when you and I were growing up, you couldn't just pick up this thing right here and film a movie. You couldn't just pick up that device and put content out to the world. You can do that now. There were many barriers to doing that, and so it was not a viable career option. There was no such thing as an influencer when you and I were growing up, right? There's no such thing as saying, I'm going to just wake up today and create content, shoot a short or Instagram video or reel or TikTok video. Like, no, that wasn't an option. So you have more people that are trying to do it. But the other side of it is that in the industry, it ebbs and flows like every industry. And I'm talking Hollywood now. Hollywood ebbs and flows. Right now, we're in an ebb. We're in an ebb for a variety of reasons. We're coming off of COVID and the pandemic definitely affected Hollywood, and we're still seeing the residual effects of that. There were multiple work stoppages within the past few years. And streaming, the advent of streaming meant that you had big media companies put a lot of money into various streaming services. Everybody had to have their own streaming services. To launch a streaming service, you have to spend on the level of billions of dollars with a B. Streaming turned out not to be the profit center that many of the media companies thought it would be. It didn't really make sense for every single media company to have their own streaming service. Now, it meant that for a time period, there were more people working in the industry than ever before and more content being made than ever before. Now you're seeing a constriction of that. You got all that content out there, right? Just like you said. Think about it. We had the writers and the actors both go on strike, and the average consumer, if it wasn't for whatever blurb went across the bottom of the ticker as those, negotiations were going on, they didn't know nor care about it. And the reason is because there was so much stuff out there that they didn't miss a new episode of their favorite primetime network show because there was so many episodes on streaming of things that they hadn't caught up to anyway, right? And so what that means is that now the studios, the media companies, the financiers are making less. So people are working less. So my peers in the industry, I don't care whether you produce, direct, write, act, doesn't matter. There's less stuff being made because so much was made during that time period. This is that ebb I'm talking about. It will flow again because it's cyclical. But right now you've got media consolidation and constriction happening. So yes, more outlets, absolutely. More content out there, absolutely. But now we're seeing the pendulum swing the other way because a lot of that content was made over the course of the last 5 to 10 years.
And what about the role of AI? So I've talked with various movie producers, and they all want to know, what is AI going to give the industry and what is it going to take away? Will it give writing for free, or will it take away acting and building sets and so on because the AI could do that?
Yeah. Yes. And yes, it will. AI giveth and AI taketh away. Look, I am somebody that is optimistic about the tool, the AI tool, and the ability to create without the same barriers, without the same resource output that was once necessary. Does that mean that we will lose jobs that existed previously? Absolutely, without a question. But are you going to replace writers with AI? Not largely. Like, could you do a form of content without that human element? You could, but it won't be the same. I have an inordinate amount of faith in the power of human creativity. Now, humans using a tool like AI in order to create more efficient and more cost-effective and a greater volume of things, no question. But I don't think we are at the point or even near the point that AI created content without human involvement will take the place of human art and creativity. So even now, when you look at things that are online, right? We're in a world where, depending on what it is, somebody sends you a picture or a meme or, video or something. If it's outrageous, immediately you go, wait, is this AI? Is this real? Or is it AI, right? You're already skeptical. So we haven't just adopted and allowed like, oh, yeah, I think this is real, because AI and the way that we have used it has already created whatever the most preposterous thing out there is, somebody's created it using AI. So immediately you're going, wait, is it real? So there's a desire to know and a desire to see something that is real, right? So during the time, for example, of when it felt like there was a Marvel movie that was coming out like every quarter, right? Big, and it was always a huge spectacle. Now even, you still have movies with big spectacle. Marvel is an amazing brand, still coming out. But even now, you're seeing, if you look at the movies that have worked, whether you're talking about theatrical box office or big streaming numbers, many of them, while still being based on IP and brands, like that hasn't changed, but many of them are things that have to have a very specific human element in them. Because I think that audiences still very much want that human connection. Doesn't matter. You can show the world blowing up, 7,000 worlds blowing up, amazing comic book figures and creatures. But if you don't care about the central figures, then all that stuff just feels like noise. You still have to care. You still have to be invested in what the narrative is, what the story is. And I still think people do that far better than AI does today. So I see it as a tool. I'm optimistic but cautious because I do know it will absolutely have an effect on the humans in our business.
I'm wondering if actually the role of production is going to change a lot, because I see what you're saying about the writing. I don't think AI can replace good human writing, but in terms of recreating a set, in terms of creating, video images of actors acting, like we've already seen very believable AI things that are just beginning to be created now, but it's only going to get better. Writing, I don't think is going to get better because AI is learning on basically all the content that's being created by AI. So the writing is probably already plateaued. But I wonder if the role of production is going to get somewhat, or at least it'll be cheaper to make a movie because I don't have to worry about making the set or the actors.
In certain instances, no question at all. But remember, this is not that new, right? There's a perception amongst non-Hollywood folks that, like, because of the advent of AI, now movies are being made drastically different. Remember, we've been using computer-enhanced, computer-generated graphics and imagery for a very long time. I made a movie called Beast, and it starred Idris Elba, and he was running from a man-eating lion in the jungles of South Africa. And in order to make that movie, we created the lion, total CGI, right? Because you can't responsibly make a movie with real lions doing the things that our lion was doing. But also to make that movie, because there were certain elements and stunts and scenes in the movie that it was unrealistic to have Idris as an actor actually do. Part of what we did was we took Idris and put him in a chamber, and we basically scanned his entire body. And then we had this digital representation of Idris Elba, of our star, and then we were able to manipulate that in certain scenes. Now, it wasn't a whole movie of, computer-generated Idris Elba.
Could you have done that?
Of course. Sure you could. Now, I wouldn't have, and that's part of what the strikes were about, to make sure that irresponsible producers aren't doing that. But number one, I could have done that, but it would not have felt like Idris, right? I don't care how good it is. There would have been something soulless about his performance. Also, we only used it in very specific places in order to augment what Idris was doing, and specifically because he was interacting with this CGI lion. But that was something that, that movie was shot years ago, before there was ever a ChatGPT. And so we've been using that as a tool for quite some time. But again, it's a tool. Humans being in charge using the tool. Now, I'm not naive to think that it's not a very, very powerful tool that can be misused, number one, and that also can take the place, as you point out, of people who build sets, of actually shooting on location, right? There's certainly, you see a movie now, and because I do what I do, oftentimes I can tell that, they weren't actually in the African savannah, but the average person maybe can't tell, or more importantly, maybe doesn't care. And so now that tool, is it going to lose jobs? Is it going to, take away jobs? 100%. Those movies will be able to be made without having to go on location, more efficiently, less expensively, 100%. All that. I do not disagree. That is happening now. It's been happening for a while. It is inevitable. It is what technology does. How we use it, though, to me, is the key question that folks in my business have to be thinking about.
So, earlier you said that, a lot of your confidence came from, your parents basically raised you to be confident and to believe that you could do anything you want to do. Let's say someone's listening to this and they didn't have that background, they didn't have that upbringing, but you also said confidence is a muscle. So how can someone essentially exercise that muscle?
Yep. Two ways. One of the things that I am a very ardent believer in is building the confident muscle that you have, building your own self-confidence muscle by growing your own self-belief. So one of the ways you do that, one of my secrets, is literally a daily affirmation, which some people do, some people hear about, but don't dismiss it as just some kind of trite, I'm great thing. No. What we do very often as people is we give our power away to somebody else, right? You want to be a filmmaker, you present a script to Will Packer. Will Packer says, no, I'm not going to make it, right? I don't think Sharon wants to see that movie, whatever it is. And you now think, all right, well, Will Packer, he's a big, important producer. He said no, so the answer is no. It must not be good enough. It must not, be ready. I shouldn't make this movie. Well, you have to understand, Will Packer is giving you his opinion based on his perspective and his belief system and his current situation. There's nothing wrong with that. You take that, take it in, but you don't let that be the end-all, be-all about your project, your endeavor, and specifically your dream. Don't give that power to anybody else. That power is yours. There were many, many times after I graduated from college when I was chasing this dream of being a filmmaker, and I was, in my journey, getting told no about Hollywood over and over again. I was delivering newspapers up at 3 a.m. every day. I would fold and bag newspapers for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, right? And I was delivering those every day in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I would temp. I would answer phones at a temp service. This is all with an electrical engineering degree. So my friends were out there making high five, low six figures, and I was making, like $5, $6 an hour, but I was chasing my dream. But I realized until I say it's over, it's not over. Even though Hollywood and all the powers that be were going, yeah, this isn't for you. Until I said it, it wasn't over. So I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to admit it. What I would do, I learned this at that time, is every morning I would look in the mirror and I would tell myself, you got this. You have what it takes. You have the skill set. You're prepared. You can do it. And I still do that to this day. And the reason is because that's the most important voice that you're going to hear that day. And if that voice is not telling you, you got this, success is possible, you have the skill set, if that most important voice is saying, you might fail, this could go bad, oh my God, what are we doing? It will build up. It builds a drumbeat inside your head. And so make sure the most important voice that you're hearing is telling you those positive affirmations. It's probably the last time you're going to hear it during the day. Most of us don't live in an environment where we're getting told how great we are all the time. That's just not life. So you got to have somebody telling you that. Why not make it the most important person to tell you that? The other thing is you got to build some momentum. And I am a believer in fabricating momentum, right? Too many times we get stuck on the first rung. We're trying to do something, and that first goal we're trying to hit, you never hit it because it feels impossible, right? Too many times the first goal is I'm going to climb the mountain. No. Make the first goal, I'm going to buy the hiking boots. Second goal, I'm going to buy a rope. Third goal, I'm going to get in the car and drive to the mountain and look at it. Fourth and fifth goal, things that are accomplishable. When I made my first movie after college, I wanted to raise high six figures. $750,000 was the goal. Couldn't raise it for the life of me. So I pivoted and said, instead of making a financial goal, I'm going to make a date goal. Whatever I'm able to raise within the next 3 months, that's going to be the budget of the film. That's what I did. So in 3 months, I didn't raise $750,000. I raised $75,000. And then I made a very low budget $75,000 movie. But I made the damn movie. And I did that, and it showed other people that I could do it. But most importantly, it showed myself that I could do it, that I could do something. We get stuck on the first rung because it's hard to get started. Set goals that are accomplishable so that you can now, that's what training that muscle looks like. I finished goal 1. I finished goal 2. I finished goal 3. I tell people in my company all the time, do a little something every day towards getting these projects off the ground. A little something, whatever it is. Because if you do it and you stack enough days together, at the end of the year, you're going to be way closer if you haven't accomplished that goal to accomplishing it. So it's those two things, in my belief, that fabricating that momentum, very, very important. And then that daily affirmation, making sure the most important voice in your head is saying positive things about how you can do it.
That's really great advice. Look, Will Packer, who's better than you? Huh? Name of your
Nobody,
book, who's
damn
better
it.
than
That's
you?
the answer to the question. And nobody's better than you or anybody else. And James, I work with all these crazy successful people with the, big stars, and they make this money and they got power and all this stuff. And some of them are really toxic and some of them are negative and some of them really insecure. But some of the most successful people I'm around, they don't believe that they could be successful. They believe they're destined for success. And when you do that, it manifests itself in ways you don't even think about. You walk into a room different. You answer emails different. You answer your phone different, It just manifests itself differently when you start to believe that. But you got to do it step by step.
I like that. Well, Will, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Your movies are great. Your book's an inspiration. The advice you've given on this podcast is inspirational. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the book. Hopefully we'll run into each other again. And I appreciate you coming on the show.
I'd love that, man. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.